This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guest on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Welcome to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest today, Jeff Schechter, also known as Shecky. Shecky, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your time today. And before we find out what you're actually doing today, if you would, could you tell me, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, it's a funny question when you ask that one. My parents always asked me that. I always answered with one word, and that was rich.
Oh, well, that's a good word to answer if you want to have some goals in your life. So how did you define that as a little kid?
Well, as a little kid, I just kind of looked at, some of like my dad's friends that had money, and I saw the lifestyle that they had, and it was really more just based on wanting that kind of lifestyle.
So now define that lifestyle as a little kid. They have fancy cars. Did they go on tremendous vacations? They have a big old house. How did you see that?
Yeah, all the usual stuff. I mean, my perspective on it's different now, obviously, many years later than what it was then. But yeah, at the time it was like, okay, I want the cool cars. I want the nice house. I want to take the nice trips. I want the nice clothes. I want to have a nice lifestyle.
Okay. So as a little kid, you wanted to be rich. Now tell us, what do you do today, and has that helped you achieve your goal?
Yeah, well, that's a kind of a double-edged sword. But I essentially have been an entrepreneur my entire life, and have been rich and not rich, and got it and lost it and whatever. It's just been quite an interesting journey. But currently, I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called High Return Real Estate. And what we do is we're what's known as a turnkey investing company. So we essentially do all the heavy lifting for investors, meaning we prepare properties. We buy some of the crappier inner city properties. We do a really, really thorough rehab on them. We get them in really nice shape. We get them tenanted. We work with a professional property management team. And then we sell them to investors as performing assets. So typically these investors are, from other areas. Like I live in Indianapolis, and most of our operations are here. And we're in an area where prices and price to rent ratios are far more attractive than, say, a guy living in California. So most of our investors are obviously out of state and living in more expensive areas, and they need somebody like us to do all the boots on the ground stuff so they can end up with a great property. So we really just have a service that we do for investors.
Okay, yeah. So kind of walk me through a week in the life of, what does your typical work week look like?
Well, I mean, I wear a lot of hats. So I am managing construction crews. And we've got, 5 or 6 different crews that we work with. We're typically rehabbing somewhere between 10 to 20 properties at a time. So that's real busy. And then we have a couple people that we work with that help us with acquisitions. They're not part of our staff per se, but they're kind of more in the wholesale world, and we work with them. So I occasionally go out and look at properties. I talk to investors. Obviously as a CEO, I'm running the company, so there's always some sort of fire to put out. We have a weekly meeting with our property management team, and we go through everything like that. And then we have a couple of what we call fulfillment clients. So these are other groups, educational groups and networking groups that sell to other investors. And we actually do the heavy lifting for them as well behind the scenes. So they're kind of the sales arm for some of that. So we sell some directly to our own investors, and we sell some through other networks. So, regular meetings with them too, just to make sure deals are closing and everybody's understanding what's going on. And so it's different every week. And then my background is also marketing and digital marketing. So I'm the guy that writes all the emails, and we run our own podcast, and, I do a lot of our content marketing. So yeah, I'm busy. I mean, I am really busy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if you would kind of take me through your career path from being a little kid to today, because you referenced being an entrepreneur, losing it all, kind of getting it back. Could you kind of walk me through like your educational past and then your initial entrepreneur attempts and successes and failures?
The entrepreneur attempts started even as early as when I was in college. So, like most people, I'm a baby boomer, and, like most people of my generation, our parents told us, get a good job or get a good education, get a good job, and, be some sort of professional, and, you'll have a good life. And I did not do well in college. I majored in partying basically, and did not have a lot of focus for the studies. But I always had this sort of entrepreneurial streak. And I remember when I was like maybe 19 or 20, I was still in college, getting involved in network marketing for the first time, multi-level marketing. Back then there was only 3 or 4 companies that were doing that. One of them was Amway, and that was the one that I was in.
Okay.
And, it was the old classic thing, pitch people and, draw little circles on a whiteboard and teach people how to grow organizations. And I went to all the rallies and seminars and got all jacked up on that stuff and never really made a lot of money with it. And I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing when I look back on it. I got a lot of personal development out of that. One of the things I will say about the network marketing industry is that they're very, very heavy on personal and self-development. So I was able to get exposed to that kind of information at a very young, impressionable age, and that ended up really helping me a lot through many, many entrepreneurial ventures over the years. I did a bunch of house hacking back in the 80s before that word even became known, which means basically, you just buy a crappy house and live in it and fix it up while you live in there and hopefully stay there at least 2 years so you don't have the capital gains tax, and then you sell it for a profit, move on to the next one. So having been single for a long time, I didn't have the worry of wife and kids and things like that, and was able to do, I don't know, like 5 or 6 of them over the years. So I made money doing that. I essentially lived for free. But I had a number of businesses. I was business with my brother for many years down in Texas, and we had a data processing company. But then in, I don't know, 2000 and something, I moved from San Antonio to Austin because I started seeing that after losing my ass in a flipping business that I had in Texas, and the market, as everybody knows, went south in 2008, 2009. And I was left holding the bag and pretty much lost everything I had again. That was the second time. I moved to Austin because there was a really amazing digital marketing community there, and just amazing entrepreneurial group of people that I got connected to by going through some meetup groups. And so I just moved there and started getting connected with them, and eventually went to work for a guy that I knew that had a digital marketing agency doing mostly Facebook ads. And admittedly, I'm not the geeky guy. Even though I'm in kind of a numbers business, I'm not the guy that wants to look at spreadsheets all day and look at how ads are performing, but I was really drawn to the psychological side of the marketing on the internet. Like what is it that's working in terms of getting in people's brains and scratching something that, maybe bugging them that's going to, cause them to take some action to buy this product or look at this particular blog post, or, what would be intriguing for them to open up this video, that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed that and learned more about copywriting and things like that. And all that stuff has served me really well. And ironically, the guy that I was working for, who's still a friend of mine, was giving away a lot of free advice to our clients. And I said to him one day, dude, like, people will pay for this advice. Why don't we start a consulting division? So that's what I ended up doing for him. Is once I started understanding the psychology, we started building classes for business owners to teach them how to do some digital marketing. And of course, there was upsells into group classes, which myself and the other gentleman ran. And then there was a further upsell to individual coaching and consulting, which he took some of the clients and I took some of the others. And it worked out really well for about 3 or 4 years. Then my favorite client, which was a guy up in Michigan, who ironically is in the network marketing business, to bring things full circle, reached out to me one day and he's like, Shecky, look, I've been working with you on, getting leads and understanding how to market for my network marketing company, but I've been buying some properties from this turnkey group in Indianapolis and I'm getting some pretty decent returns. And they're not all that communicative. They're not all that polished. And, I've been making some recommendations to friends and family, and they're buying some properties and they're paying me some commissions. And he said, I think there's a business here. Like, would you take a look at this for me and just give me your brain power in terms of how could a how could a company like this be structured and marketing? And I said, dude, sure, no problem. You're one of my favorite clients. I'm not even going to charge you billable hours. Like, let's just get on the phone and brainstorm. And that was, I don't know, 3.5 years ago. And I remember that conversation very well. We had booked an hour and the energy was just fantastic. We were on the phone for like 3.5 hours. I remember pacing around my apartment in Austin, and by the time I got done, I was like all sweaty. And but we got a lot of good ideas out of it. It was just a brainstorm, and I was just doing it to help the guy out. And I put together an email that had a list of 12 or 13 major bullet points that we had covered, like, who would be your best client? What would be the marketing channels we would use? What's the hook? That sort of stuff. And the very next day he writes back and he's like, okay, let's do it. And I'm like, let's do what? So I write back to him, like, WTF, dude, like, what do you want to do? He's like, I want you to be my partner. And he said, I value your work ethic. I've worked with you before, and I look at all this marketing stuff and I can't do this myself. So I'm willing to go 50-50 with you on this company. And, we can use these guys that I'm buying from as our original supplier and just see how it goes from there. And I was floored. Flabbergasted. So, right. But ironically, and I'm going to get a little bit woo-woo spiritual on you here for a minute, about 8 weeks prior to that, I had written on my little whiteboard in my home office a few things that I was looking for in my next opportunity, because I was looking to get away from my buddies in Austin. Not that they were bad, but it just was their company, right? It wasn't my company. I had this division within their company, and they were starting to get real tight with the purse strings and, pulling all this stuff, like, changing our commission arrangement and all that. And, I just kind of got to a point where it's like, yeah, I need to go back to being self-employed. I just I'm not cut out working for somebody else. Right. So I put this list up on my board, and, there was really just 4 or 5 very, very general things. It was written with my horrible little lefty chicken scratching up in the top left corner, and it was already fading. And one of them was like, hey, I want to sell a high ticket item. I want to be the best in my space. I want to leverage my digital marketing skills. I want to leverage some of my consultative selling skills. Oh, and by the way, I don't want to work alone. I want to work with a partner. So when I'm looking back at this email from Jack and having this conversation, my business partner's name is Jack, and I get this, conversation going with like, well, how does this look? I hang up the phone with him and I look up at this list and I'm going, holy crap. Like, I basically just put this out there to the universe, like, this is what I want, and delivered, done. Here you go.
Right. It was exactly what you had identified, right?
Exactly. Check,
Wow.
check, all the way down the board, right? And I never looked for it, whatever, it came to me. And so once I looked back at my whiteboard, that decision to do this business, even though I had never run a turnkey company before, had no idea what I was getting into, that decision became very, very easy. That's what got me to today.
Yeah, and that's really amazing. It's really cool, your whole career path, because I think, I feel like I could have been an entrepreneur, but I was never exposed to that as a potential path. And the fact that you learned it at such an early age, and not only that, but you saw the opportunities and you were willing to change and adjust, even move to make it happen. I think that's really fascinating. Is probably one of the big reasons for your success, that adaptability. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think, everybody's got a different tolerance for risk. And again, I alluded to it before, and maybe it's just because I was never married and never had kids, or at least not yet. But I didn't feel like I was putting any other family members in jeopardy, right? It's like, it's just me. So if things screw up, okay, well, I'll just figure it out.
Right. You had a certain level of freedom in
Correct.
order to go after those things. Right.
Yep.
Wow. As a reminder, you can check out all previous episodes at learnfromothers.org. And if you're an educator or a student, you can search for podcasts by career cluster. So we learned what you wanted to be when you grew up, which was rich. I love that. And what you do today. So looking back on your entire career, what would you do differently?
Well, I think that's a tough question because, again, to be a little bit more spiritual, in all of our mistakes, as you evolve as a person, you start understanding that all these bad things or things that you called bad happened for a reason. Or you can choose to look at it that it happened for a reason. And in there are some very, very valuable lessons. And so after a while, you kind of gained the maturity of understanding that, okay, I learned the hard way on this one, but it's a very valuable lesson that A, I'll never do it again, B, I'll do it differently. So I don't know that I would necessarily do things differently. The one advice that I would go back and give my younger self is to be more, and I'm an extremely resilient guy, but just to be more aggressive in terms of never giving up. Now, I'm not saying that every entrepreneurial venture should not be given up on, because some are just worthless. Some are just like, hey, you get to a point where like you tried, you did whatever, you did everything you can. And, maybe this just isn't a good working model, or, it's got to be changed or whatever. But we are successful now today. I mean, this business, we're 3.5 years in, and this is, even after all the other stuff I've done, and I've had a lot of really cool businesses, this was by far the hardest one to get off the ground, the hardest one to get profitable, the most amount of moving parts, the most amount of dealing with people that are less than ethical that we had to do business with to get this thing off the ground. I don't know that I would necessarily do it all over again if I had to do it, but here we are. And so the one piece of advice I would really give is, stick to it. And the reason we're successful is we stuck to it. We took some pretty serious licks, and we just said, hey man, you know what? We're just going to keep going. There's an opportunity here. There's buyers. We have a great product. We do things better than our competitors do. We're just going to keep going. And somehow we just figured it out. And I think that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that give up too soon.
Right. Okay. Now you just gave your younger self advice. Is there any additional advice you would give to a college student or even a high school student who wants to do what you do? So you could define it as an entrepreneur, or you can define it as a real estate entrepreneur. Is there any additional advice you would give them?
Well, I think the other thing is it goes back to that whole risk thing too, is you have to identify what you're willing to do as far as risk. So for example, whereas I didn't have the risk involved of wife and kids, there are people out there, even in college, that are married and have the income from the spouse. So
right.
that creates a whole benefit that I never had either. So I think what you have to do is you have to look and assess your risk and be fair with yourself about what that risk is and what am I willing to do? How far am I willing to take this? Yes, once I agree that I'm doing it, I'm never going to give up. But I think for a lot of people, the hardest part is just getting started.
Right.
So many people are, not just in real estate, but entrepreneurship in general. They're like, I want to do this, I want to do that, and it's like, great. There's a big difference in saying I want to do it and just doing it.
Right.
And
absolutely.
You're going to learn way more by doing than by analyzing, certain business models. And, it's great to look at business models for ideas, but eventually if you get something that you're jazzed about, and that's important too, is something that you would like to do every day, then you have to just go for it. I mean, you can't hold back. You can't, what about this? What about this? The risk, so what? The only way that you're going to be successful is just say, screw it, let's just go.
Right. Yeah. Do something. Get out there and start
do
it.
something.
Yep.
And you're going to make a bunch of mistakes and you're going to learn. And as long as you keep going and learn from your mistakes, just keep going and you'll be successful. And you can learn from others' mistakes too, but you can learn as you go. You don't have to learn everything prior to starting.
And I'd like to point out that in that sentence you just said, you actually said the name of my podcast, Learn from Others. So thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Well, are there any current projects you're working on that you would like to share?
Yes, I guess we've made some pretty significant changes to the structure of our company, even 3 years in. And, we've changed the way we do all of our rehabs and checklists and have really, retooled a very, very difficult business with a lot of moving parts. And we partnered with just an absolutely fantastic property management team that's national. And they're a very, very high-tech company. So we have, technology that is able to integrate with each other and provide a united front for the investor base. So I guess I wouldn't call that a project, but it's an ongoing project. I'm really proud of what we have put together. It's not been easy, and it's finally starting to turn into a system, a very, very systematic way to help others build wealth. So I'm very, very proud of that.
That's awesome. And now what's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you and your company?
Yeah, it's real simple. We go by High Return Real Estate, And you just put a .com on the end of that. You'll find out everything you need to about us. We also have a podcast for investors that are in the same kind of boat as us, like, buy and hold type investing. And that's called the High Return Real Estate Show. So it's really generic, but it works.
It's straight to the point and tells you what you're getting, right?
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking us on your career journey today.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley LFO. And we will see you soon as we learn from others together.